Look, after what the films were doing to him, who knew Superman still had some life in it? Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to that channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you'll be among the first to know. So, I gotta say that I had absolutely no desire to watch this pilot. Um, Let me give you a little bit of history of my life with the Arrowverse as a whole. I watched every single episode of Arrow from start to finish. Some seasons better than others, but I stuck with it. Die Hard, and from that I did spin off, and I watched The Flash, and I've watched Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow, and I enjoyed those shows. But about halfway through the run of those, and towards the would be the back end of Arrow, I started getting tired of them. They became complacent. You could start seeing the cheesiness and campiness of them, and a lot of that had to do with while those were on during their run. Shows like Jessica Jones or Daredevil started popping up on Netflix, and you start getting a much more grounded and serious take of these DC films, of superheroes. Period. And so it's coming back to the CWDC shows just didn't have the same blah to them, and so eventually I petered out on all of them. I stopped watching Flash, I stopped watching Supergirl, I stopped watching Legends. I watched 3 episodes of Batwoman to try and see if that was any different, and I was like, nope. There's a formula to these CW shows, and I'm just not here for it anymore. Now the outlier was Black Lightning, because it didn't sort of fall into the same tropes of being hero with a band of merry men that are his team, cracking jokes and cracking wise all the time. It took itself a little bit more serious and felt like a very different vehicle, premise, and concept. Like the actual follow through was different than all the other CW DC shows. So I enjoyed that. I'm happy to say that Superman is also the outlier. It falls more in line with Black Lightning than it does in the rest of the Arrowverse. It's not campy, it's not cheesy, and dare I say, it's the most cinematic of all of the CW DC shows that exist. I'm not sure what the budget is for this thing, but it looks like there's a lot of money on screen. First thing, there is an undeniable chemistry between Tyler and Elizabeth as Clark and Lois. They have something together, and that is the linchpin of any type of series that is dealing with these characters in the way that they are. This isn't so much a Superman like the animated series where we're focusing on Superman and his heroics. It's also dealing with the humanity and what they have to go through as a couple, and in this case as parents. But the two of them work well together, and it's good to see them sort of feed off of each other and kind of have this thing where you feel like, oh yeah, these guys were meant for each other, and have been doing this for quite some time. I did not know how I would feel about there being super kids, or at least one of them, but about them having kids. I feel like that could have gone terribly wrong, but it works here. I think it's helpful that they are sort of, there's 2 of them, and they sort of act as the great ids of both of Kal-El's sides. Clark is more like Jonathan, where he's super, his heart is on his sleeve. He's super, very charismatic, but a little silly and goofy. And then the id of Superman is sort of is Jordan, who's a little darker and powers. Obviously, he's the powered one of the two. As far as we know for this part, I think they both probably will, but they just might manifest in different ways. But it's good to sort of see that they are 2 sides of what they are. Obviously, dashed in with a lot of Lois, but it's cool that that's sort of the way that we're being introduced to them. They're a little angsty, which all CW teens are, and they're good-looking dudes. Side note: I know it's a Superman trope, and so we have to sort of always use this glasses taking off thing. But hear me out. If his own kids can't recognize him and who he is and what he does with or without his glasses, there's more problems with his family than meets the eye. Perhaps I am at the age, like with Black Lightning, where seeing superheroes have to balance humanity and real life things in a real way that isn't super campy or corny and balance that with the heroics is how I want my superheroism fed to me. That's how I want to see it. And so I love the Cal having to be a dad to Jordan, who he wasn't really always close to, and not because he was a neglectful father, but not because he was doing anything wrong or cheating on his wife or like having a second family. He was saving the world, and so there's this little back and forth with him realizing that he needs to take a little bit more time to be at home. But what does that mean for the world? And then does his kid start feeling a little bit bad or selfish because the world is now suffering because I'm choosing to keep my father at home. It's a fun little toggle. And I also gotta say I don't see a world where Jordan does not go rogue and try to beat the crap out of his dad. And I'm all here for that because that's gonna break Cal. And that's gonna be some interesting and exciting television to see. And I know I've talked about the drama a lot because you're like, whoa, is there any action in the show? There is. There's plenty of action, and it's shot well, and it looks very cinematic, much more than I think any of the other CW shows are. I don't know what the budget, like I said before, I don't know what the budget is for this, or in comparison to what this budget is to all the other Arrowverse shows, but this just feels more cinematic. It doesn't feel as... I think anytime you go bright, which they do for a lot of those shows, except for Arrow, when you go bright, like Flash or Supergirl or Legend, some of it just feels like it's almost done for a TV set or a TV like backlot, which may be the case. It may even be the case here for Superman, but the way this is shot just feels like it's more cinematic, more of a real lived-in world. Smallville feels like a lived-in place as opposed to this bright world. So everything is just a lot more grander here, which is interesting because I think this show has a lot more akin to Supergirl, where the action is obviously flying and punching and all that stuff. In the few moments that we see here, it is done significantly better. And maybe they have just learned from what not to do or what sort of to tweak versus what happens in Supergirl, which is where Tyler started. Which brings me up to a point that is sort of interesting. I don't know where this show exists in the rest of the Arrowverse. And I don't know if it's on a multiple Earth, which we've already sort of established, but this show does not mention any of the other heroes. Does not mention Flash, Batman, Batwoman, specifically Kara, he has the biggest connection to. Does not mention them at all, and that's fine because for this pilot he's dealing with some real world stuff about his own internal family, so he's not really concerned with all of that. But it doesn't even lead to the belief that that stuff exists. So I don't know, and we don't really mention in any of the Arrowverse versions of Superman that they have grown kids, so I don't know where timeline wise is this 15 years later than we would have seen him there or what. I'm not really sure what the case is there time wise. We also don't really have anything where he would imply or suggest. Now that's not to say that these characters that stuff's not connected. They just in this pilot don't really go out of their way to mention it, and it makes it the way everything feels like this is a very different lived-in world than that. I could almost see Black Lightning probably maybe coming in over here, but I could not. Those other shows, as of the way it stands now, don't really seem like they mesh or vibe with anything that they have going. And also, spoiler, if you haven't seen the episode, go away. But in the final scene, we get a shot of what we believe to be Lex Luthor, who appears to be from the back anyway, a African-American male, which is very different than the version of John Cryer playing Lex for Supergirl, which, again, multiple Earths could be a different Lex, or just could be a different time period, or could be a son of Lex, who knows? But there are some things that are just like, I don't know where this fits in with the rest of it, but I'm not going to lie to you. I like the show so much. I don't care, but I know that might rub some folks who are fully invested in everything that the CW Arrowverse is doing. That might rub them the wrong way. But if you guys seen the first episode of Superman and Lois, what did you guys think of the pilot? Go ahead and leave your comments and thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. We're currently doing this history of sitcoms through WandaVision, which should be interesting because this last episode of WandaVision didn't have a sitcom really attached to it. We also have a sister podcast called You Can't Do That Anymore, where we talk about classic movies like Back to the Future, Gone with the Wind, American Beauty, and look at those films from what they did back in the day through the eyes of 2021 and see if they could do some of those things that they did then today. Like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.